Hey everybody, I'm Jordan. I'm the social media manager over at Celigo and the host of the Celigo Technology Leaders podcast. Today we're joined by my co-host Mark Simon, the Vice President of Strategy. Welcome, Mark. And as well, we have
Hello.
Michael O'Toole, the VP of Services at Brightidea, an enterprise level idea management platform. Welcome to the show, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely. Very much so. As we do around here, Michael, could you give the folks just joining us and listening a little bit of background on yourself and kind of how you got to the VP of Services role at Bright Idea? What led you there, and what was your journey like?
Sure. So I'll sort of go back more years than I care to think about right now, but I've always been in technology, which is why I classify myself as the oldest Gen Z in the room. And starting out today, you call it software engineering. Back then, we called it programming. And so I've always been around the use of software, the use of technology to address business issues, business problems. That over the years sort of parlayed itself into a role. My first real role in the software world was with an enterprise software company called PeopleSoft, where I landed up in professional services, starting out as a consultant, helping customers implement the software. But again, it's all about using technology to solve a business problem. Over the years, I worked at a number of other companies. I also went out on my own for a little bit, but I ended up at Brightidea 6.5 years ago, and I found the company when they reached out to me, looking for a VP of Services, and I didn't really know a great deal about their field, right? And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but. When the recruiter introduced to me what Brightidea was doing, you could have just about knocked me over with a feather, because it really solves a problem that a lot of organizations have, and that is, how do I capture ideas, things that I could work on? How do I turn those into things that I want to work on, or develop them into things I want to work on? And how do I prioritize, right? If I look at the world today, organizations use Atlassian and Jira, right, to manage IT projects, but they don't have a way of determining, right, within that, which projects that they should work on. And that's where Brightidea fits in. It fills the gap between the concept of the idea or the innovation and the leading up to the implementation of the innovation itself. So, as I said, I've been at Brightidea 6.5 years. Steady growth over that 6.5 years. Not hockey stick growth, but steady growth over those years, and loving it every day.
Well, fantastic. Appreciate that kind of explanation and introduction. Like I said, very glad to have you here. I will ask a little bit more, and I know we'll dive into Brightidea as a platform, but if I had to give a medal to the most generic sounding work title, professional services might get a silver or gold. And so for those who aren't familiar, could you tell us a little bit about what a Vice President of Professional Services does? What is that exactly, and how do you help Brightidea succeed in doing so?
Sure. So in the software business, right, on sort of the customer-facing front, so I'm leaving behind sort of product engineering, marketing, but on the customer-facing front, we sell the solution, we support the customer and customer success. But oftentimes, when a company is looking at a new software solution, they need to know how to implement it and how to make it work for them and how to get value out of that implementation, and how to meet the success metrics that justify the investment that they make in the software. That's where professional services comes in. I manage a team of consultants and engineers that basically help configure the software for our customers. In some instances, we provide change management consulting, right? So when you're trying to introduce change into an organization, adoption is hard. So we are also educating customers on concepts of innovation management, idea management, and how those bring value to the organization. Because it's not just a cultural thing; it's how to make a business more effective, more efficient, and simply put, better.
Fantastic. Almost a holistic implementation, if you will.
Yeah. Yes.
That's really interesting, Michael. When I think every software company, when it comes to their professional services, they have to figure out what's the scope of practice for the PS that's appropriate. And certainly, I've seen this because I think I know that we've grappled with this in times, and I've been part of these discussions. And you hit on something really interesting, which was the change management component, because it's not just, the way I look at it, it's not just whatever software you have, it's not just implementing that software, but as much or more of a determinant of success is how it fits into the organization, how it actually fits into the business processes of the organization. Do the business processes of the org actually need to be reworked to fit the software or to meet best practices, which hopefully the software, or are they differentiated in some way, need to be customized? There's this sort of interesting inner working, and it often leads to almost this sort of, I think of more of process consulting, almost, you're edging into management consulting. And I'm curious to hear about how at Brightidea you've tackled that kind of problem and figuring out what's the right scope. How broad do you get with your scope in that regards, and where do you draw that line?
Okay. So I'm going to start with the line. The way we look at it, the way I look at it is are the services that we're providing increasing or helping the customer adopt, increasing the use of or helping the customer adopt, right, our software. Okay. I describe us as Sherpas, and the customer is choosing to climb a mountain. We'll call that for now Mount Innovation. Okay. It's our job to help them get to the top of the mountain successfully, safely, and in such a way that they can do it again and again. Because they generally don't want to use Sherpas all the time, right? They don't want to use professional services all the time. But in many instances, particularly in the category of software that we're in, this is new to them. They've never done this before, and the question becomes, how do I implement an innovation program, right, within my company? And what most people don't realize is innovation is going on in every company all the time, right? And it's a matter of finding those pockets of innovation, showing how a standardized process with governance can bring about rigor in terms of the way you go about it, and how software supports that, right? So the line for me is, are we helping increase the use of the Brightidea software? That could be from 0 to 1. It could be from 1 to 100.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that definitely does. There was something there that jumped out for me, Michael, as you mentioned the innovation and the process. It's almost like the process of innovation. And that strikes me as something a bit unique, because if I fill the room with a bunch of creatives, they might tell me that and you try to apply process, they might tell me that the process is getting away in the innovation. But I think you're advocating something else. I'm curious to get your take on that. How process actually maybe frees up innovation.
So, as I said, innovation is occurring in all organizations constantly, right? I happen to have a son in the advertising space. They are constantly, they're creative. They're testing out ideas. But they take ideas, and they may take 10 ideas, and 9 of them end up on the cutting room floor, and they implement one. Well, the 9 ideas that they're throwing away, okay, might have value to another customer, to another part of the organization, right? And they've just thrown them on the floor. Where Brightidea comes in is, one, we help you create transparency and visibility into all of those ideas so that many people can see, evaluate, and judge them. We capture them so you've got the history and you can see where they originated, the type of problem they're trying to address, and how they might go about addressing that. But you can also archive them, because an idea that comes in today might not be a good idea today, but it could be a good idea tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Without the software, without the process, and without the governance, you start from scratch every single time.
Michael, do you find that meeting the creatives where they are is something that's important when implementing Brightidea as a new piece of technology or software? And the reason that I ask that is Celigo, we're an iPaaS company. We deal with integrations to help companies bring data from whatever application they're using and automate the flow of that data into another application. And in doing a deep dive on Brightidea's website, something that I thought was interesting is you guys do have a lot of integrations. And I'm wondering if that's part of the plan to meet creatives where they are. So no matter what application they're working in, if they have some idea, does the integration strategy of Brightidea is part of that meeting those creatives where they are, to not hinder their creative process, as Mark was kind of talking about before? Like how do integrations, I guess, play into your strategy when you're implementing Brightidea as a new piece of software?
Okay, so it's a great question. I'm going to start, however, by sort of redefining the term creative. Okay, and I'm just going to say it's anybody who's got an idea on how to improve the business. Okay, to solve a problem that's occurring on the manufacturing line, to optimize a process in the finance department, to create a new market for the organization, to identify technologies that can be applied to improve the products of the organization. So creatives can be anywhere. Okay. So that's the first thing. And yes, it's important to meet them where they are, because oftentimes, and I'll take the manufacturing example, the person on the factory floor doesn't have a voice, yet they're the ones that see the problem, and they're the ones that might have the idea to solve that problem. Okay, so that's the first point I wanted to bring out there is meeting people where they are and making sure that everybody has access to an application like Brightidea is how you capture the ideas that can and the innovations that can improve an organization and make it better. Let me talk now a little bit about integrations. Okay, software cannot function as an island. The data that's in Brightidea, okay, has value, but it only has value if we can get the data to the places where it has value. Okay, so I'll just take one I've already touched on as a fairly simple example. Okay, an idea comes in through Brightidea. We need a change. It's an IT type project. It gets evaluated. The cost benefit analysis stacks up, right? And an organization says, yes, this is something we want to go with. Great. How do we manage our IT projects? Jira. Let's push this to Jira. Okay. Now you've created this, dependency, right? We have customers that take ideas in that have, they're looking for ideas that have intellectual property value or patentability, as an example, right? And we help them evaluate those ideas, build those ideas out to where they're well thought out ideas. But we're not a patent management application. So then we want to integrate with patent management. Okay, it makes sense to get that data. That's where that data ultimately belongs. But if you just took the initial idea and put it in a patent management application, it has zero value because it hasn't been well thought out. Right? Okay.
Is it fair to say then that Brightidea is almost like an idea incubator as a tool, as a software platform? It's an idea incubator for an organization. So you can intake it, incubate them there until they get to or you end up archiving, whatever it may be. But if you think about the happy path, you incubate it there until it's ready to move into its ultimate destination, which might be, like you said, Jira or a patent application management solution, or any one of thousands of applications.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we have one of our 4 core products is called Brightidea Labs, and we have an app in there called Incubate. So an idea comes in, it generally gets vetted, maybe it gets developed to the point where it seems viable, but there's still an element of doubt, right? So maybe you want to run an MVP or a proof of concept. You would run that through our Incubate product. You potentially apply alternate technologies in that process. And so, again, you're further building that out to the point you say, yes, we want to do this. Yes, we want to execute upon this. Yes, this is going to be tremendous value for our business.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Thank you for breaking that
Sure.
down. And I think the more that, well, Mark knows this because he's our vice president, but I think the more that I learn from people is, like you said, ideas and data can't be on an island. They need to be interconnected and flowing together. And I think the way that you guys currently have this set up at Brightidea to gather, incubate, and then I guess spread out to the right application or to the right place or to the right person is very cool. When you are working in implementing Brightidea with companies like Amazon or Nike or 3M or BTC or these massive, like your customers are huge enterprise customers, and that's just a few of which are located on your guys' website. I know you guys have more. How is that different than a large organization? And a large organization might have 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 employees, but you're working with companies that have 20, 40, 50,000. What's the 30,000 foot view when you're implementing software across every single department for that big of an enterprise company?
So typically we start with actually, let me step back before I say that. When companies come to us, they may already have innovation processes in place. Okay, they may not. They may have, right? So innovation management is not like finance, where there are gap accounting rules, where the standardization. We're starting to see that. There are ISO standards for innovation management. And innovation management in a lot of organizations is viewed as optional. Okay. But the smart organizations, right, the ones that are really forward thinking, are playing the long game, they're not viewing it as optional. Okay, they're viewing it as a critical part of their business. And they're the ones that have longevity in terms of their use of a software platform like Brightidea. In those organizations, innovation may be run from a central group. So in much the same way as IT and HR might be run from central groups in many organizations. And those teams then will coordinate with other parts of the organization. If you want to run, we're very strong, for example, in pharma and biotech. Okay. We have a lot of customers in that arena. Those customers like to go out to external constituents. It could be other scientists, it could be research groups, it could be universities. And they will run, innovation events or innovation challenges, right, to gather ideas. How can we? I'm just making something up here, but how might we, find a way to test blood glucose level without a needle, right? Things as simple as that, right? And what they're looking for is they're looking to bring those ideas into their organization, turn them into something that's marketable, right? It's profitable. And to do so, they're not always going to do that from within. They're going to do that, by going out to other experts in the field.
Got it. Awesome.
So, Michael, there's some other industries that have, or different management processes that have different techniques or almost best practices that are evolved. Just like if you go and you look up decision-making frameworks or methods of different types of analysis, there's things that have emerged. Are you saying that within like the concept of the innovation space and managing innovation as a process, that these sort of some of these like different, has there been an emergence of different best practices frameworks that you kind of, and so that one can subscribe to one sort of thinking process around innovation then essentially?
There is a generally accepted approach, right, in terms of how you gather ideas. I wouldn't call it documented anywhere. The ISO standards are probably the closest that you're going to come to that. But organizations, tend to go about this the same way. But there are some areas and some pitfalls, right, some traps they can fall into that can be, somewhat off-putting. And let me, just share a couple of examples here. One example would be taking ideas in, saying, look, we're looking to solve XYZ problem, or we're looking to improve, XYZ process. Going out, asking for people to submit ideas, taking those ideas in, and then shutting down all communication. Okay. Particularly if you're dealing with employees, right? Employees, next time you go and ask them, if you haven't told them what went on before, it's not that my idea was selected, but it's like knowing what went on with the program. Was it successful? If I contributed, even though my idea wasn't selected, did somebody else's contribution get selected, right? So communication and transparency are key, right? Because otherwise, next time, oh, why should I bother? I just submitted an idea last time. I have no idea what happened, right? So that's a critical thing that organizations have to consider when they're going out and soliciting ideas. And another one is to think about how an idea gets developed, right? And there's a couple of things I'll talk here. The first one is, does the person who's submitting the idea have the ability to build that idea out, or do they require further expertise from other parts of the organization, right? So someone might have a great idea, but not necessarily know how to execute on it, right? So you need to make that idea gathering simple, right? Because if you start asking complex questions that the person can't answer, then they're not going to submit, right? Similarly, okay, and I'll use an example of surveys here. So Jordan, Mark, I guarantee both of you, probably sometime in the past few months, have received emails asking you to do a follow-up survey for some service or product that you've received. And you're like, okay, I felt pretty good about that. I'll do that. And you go in and, they've said, oh, it'd take 2 minutes of your time, and 15 minutes in, you're like, I'm done, right? This is taking way too long. You've got to make it, right, appealing and follow through on your commitment, right, to the person that you're asking, right, of their time and their brain power. And then later on, if you go back to that person and say, hey, thank you so much for submitting, we want some more information, they're engaged at that point. They're absolutely engaged.
Is that
yeah.
Go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
Oh, Mike, I think you bring up a good point there, because otherwise you end up with this built-in bias in the collection. At least this is the way that I think about it, is that because only the people that are really passionate will respond, and the people that are passionate about whatever subject you're asking tend to be the ones that are very much for it, happy about it. Like you're talking, just listening feedback about a product, you either get the people that are absolutely raving and love it, or you get the people that have had a horrific experience and then hate it. And you end up with these two very polarized. The only people that are like, if they're expecting a drawn out process, you only get those, you're selecting into those groups. Whereas the people in the middle, which really you want to make them fans, or you want to prevent them from having a bad experience, if they're expecting this is going to take 15 minutes, they're not going to bother. They don't care enough to bother. Is that kind of what you see then? Do you see something like that?
It's not that we see it. We try and, when we start talking with, customers about, implementing our software and, basically building the flow to solicit the ideas, to ask the question, right? You have to phrase your questions in a very pointed way. You have to ask for the right sets of information. So that the idea can go through an initial valuation. And that's part of the learning process that is part of that change management, right? It's closely tied to the use of the software. So it falls on that side of the line. But it is still change management in an organization, because in a lot of cases, people haven't done this before, or maybe they've been doing it and not doing it well.
Interesting. I have kind of an ethical question. Do you think brands that use a software or a platform like Brightidea, rather than just recognition, should they pay their employees who come up with great ideas? Just kind of philosophically.
I think there's, I certainly have, personal opinions, but I would argue that my professional opinion is it's really up to the organization and the types of ideas that they're looking for. I will tell you, it wouldn't take you much to do some searching of some of our customers that are using our software in a public forum. So it's stuff that you can go look at. That in the public forum, prizes are offered, sponsorship is offered, venture backing is offered, be part of a corporate accelerator is offered. We have one I'll just talk about. We have a customer in Africa called Bima Lab, and they are sponsored by UK Aid, and what they're doing is they're building an internal accelerator for small up and coming financial technology companies in the African continent. Okay, and specifically in insurance in this particular instance. The website is beamerlab.org. You can go look at that and how they solicit people to submit their software. They've got people that are investors, and it's just a good way of how a platform like Brightidea can bring different entities together and solve not just a problem within a company, but a broader market or institutional problem in a country, or even in this case, a continent.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a cool way to think about it. And you mentioned, like, earlier, an employee on a manufacturing floor, he might have an idea and not have a way to fix things. And whenever I think about that, I think about Toyota, obviously the car manufacturer, giant. They have a button at every single individual station on the manufacturing floor, and if they have an idea about, hey, there's a problem with the way that we're welding this frame to this bracket, they can hit that button. The entire production stops, and the senior executive staff comes down from their office and they listen to them. And that person pitches them their idea. And if it is an idea that could, in fact, allow their manufacturing process to be cheaper or more effective or better, they will stop and re-engineer everything to incorporate that person's idea. I'm forgetting what the exact name of this philosophy of design and manufacturing is, but it's something that they've been doing for 20, 30 years at this point. And I just think it's, if I was that guy on the manufacturing floor who had the great idea to save an enterprise hundreds of millions of dollars, whether I got a promotion or whether I got pay or whether I was entered into some accelerant program within my organization, I think that, regardless of whatever anyone's personal opinion is, it's really cool to see platforms using Brightidea to give back to the people that are utilizing the tool and making the brand so much better. And I think oftentimes executives and executive leadership gets a lot of the credit, and a lot of the credit is due there. But there's always people on the ground who are, kind of in the weeds, in the trenches, thinking about things. And it's cool to see a platform like this that's used by enterprise, businesses that have thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees making billions of dollars, giving back to the smaller guys in a specific way. And regardless of whatever anyone's personal opinion is, and I'm sorry I put you on the spot with that question, but it's
No,
just cool.
not at all.
Okay, good. It's cool to see that it's being used that way.
My first reaction to what you just said is I need to make a note to have our salespeople reach out to Toyota, because if they had Brightidea, they would not have to stop the production line.
Oh, that's a good call.
But that is a classic example of the role that the Brightidea software could play in an organization, right? You've got something that's ongoing. Hey, it works, but when something works, people don't evaluate it, right? They don't reassess it. They only reassess it when it's broken. And it's when it's working that you really want to say, how can I improve it and how can I make it better? And I would like to say to do so without stopping the production of the cars, unless it's something that's really, life-threatening.
Well, speaking of giving to the lower person, I'll take commission on that idea. Mark, go ahead.
Well, Jordan, I think you're referring to the philosophy of Kaizen.
Yes.
And so I've actually done some training on that, and it's absolutely fascinating. And I have toured multiple manufacturing facilities here in the Northwest that have adopted Kaizen. There's these like work groups that develop in different places around it. Mm-hmm. And then they're really big on sharing their ideas to other groups. So I've gone in as a team before and seen this like implemented and seen how to improve it. Maybe not quite to the extent that there's a big red button and the production stops, but there's definitely a very different philosophy of all these continual small improvements coming from every possible direction. And it's it made me look at processes and business processes completely differently. So there's definitely something there to that approach. But I also think it's, for me, like when you say, oh, should someone be rewarded for coming up with an idea? I kind of think, well, absolutely. But that's really what everyone is being, employees are being compensated for, is to contribute to the good of the organization. And that, if you take especially a line level role, and if someone is executing on that role, you can do the minimum to meet your job and the expectations for that. And you will probably keep doing that forever. But if you can exceed those, you make your team, your manager more successful, your unit, you're going to naturally get more opportunity, and you're going to rise up. And I think that's the way that organizations reward people, is by having career paths through those with good ideas. So I almost think that's like intrinsic in most organizations' designs. They don't have an artificial. Now, when they have an artificial layer and they're not willing to promote people from within, I think that starts to become an issue and inhibit innovation.
Yeah, and just to go back to sort of just the concept of the production line. That's how people move off of the production line into leadership roles, right? It's how they demonstrate that leadership role. Now, that said, we do have customers that do compensate. Sometimes that compensation is small. It's a recognition. It's lunch with a senior leader. It's a couple of days extra PTO. So companies do that, and it doesn't have to be monetary. But there are ways to give people a reward and make them feel good that in many cases much better than giving them monetary compensation.
Totally. No, I mean, I think there's, I think value is the key, whether it is monetary, whether it's time, whether it is a meeting with an executive. All of those things are valued very highly. And as long as value is provided, I think it's kind of what we're going for.
We have built into the Brightidea software the concept of, we call them reputation points. But basically, when a customer starts some kind of innovation initiative, that they can allocate reputation points based upon certain activities, right? So points for signing in, points for registering, points for submitting ideas, points for commenting ideas, points for voting on ideas. And they use those, right? Gamification is a bit of a strong term for that, but a little bit of internal competitive spirit. And we've had companies on a global basis, right, try and do it organizationally. So which organization can garner the most reputation points, right, to show that they're active, that they're vested in growing the company, right, and providing that intrinsic value that you're talking about.
It's cool how much an idea management platform is so much more than an idea management platform, because like an idea or a location or a piece of software to gather ideas, that's the most simple definition. But when it comes to like a collective cross-continent teams collaborating and generating ideas to better a brand, it's such a powerful tool. And with that in mind, obviously Brightidea is much more than an idea management platform. That's just a simple way to explain it to people quickly. What's next? Like, where do you go from, you have huge enterprise customers, you have a really cool, engaging platform that, helps brands grow. What's the next on the horizon, maybe from a product side and then from a professional services side?
Well, so, let me talk a little bit in the short term of what's going on. So, one of the things that the pandemic gave us was an opportunity to bring people together virtually. And we have had, I'm just going to play off of what you just said, Jordan. We have had companies run, they'll use the term hackathons, but they're not necessarily hackathons in the traditional sense of the word, where it's coding type work. But they've had cross-functional global teams put together business ideas that include maybe a financial analysis of a line of business that you could go into, or it could be how can we do something far more efficiently, or how can we automate something, right? So they put these competitions together, and those, they'll go through a judging stage, an evaluation stage, or go through a judging stage, and potentially even a presentation stage, sort of vis-a-vis kind of Shark Tank, right? So we see a lot of that in the market, and to that extent, we're enhancing our hackathon product for our winter release, and we're taking it where it's fairly common now in the software arena to have not just a software product, but also a solution, right? And a solution being a combination of the product, the consulting, the training, the education to go along with that, so that when a customer comes to us, as they might go to any other software company, that we can deliver all components of that, and they know what they are going to have at the end of the services, right? So they sign a contract, they get the software, and at the end of the services, they know that they basically run through one run of this initiative. Okay. Where do we go from here? We're constantly evaluating the market. Our CEO and founder, Matt Greeley, and the co-founder, Vincent Carbone, are constantly looking at what's going on in the market, where are there adjacencies that we can develop into, where are there adjacencies that we might already have, essentially what that market needs. And for us, it's a marketing and a packaging component. So we're about to have our 2024 strategic planning offsite the week after next. So more to come on that. But for now, if you're a company that's running hackathons or looking to run hackathons, definitely take a look at what we've got coming out in our winter release.
Can I wager that you used your own product at your strategic management offsite?
We do, and in fact, I use it. I use it within my team. We also use. We encourage our customers to use our product. So one of the things that we're proud of is we have a strong rating on a site called G2 Crowd. Okay. And we use G2 Crowd because it's the voice of the customer versus the voice of some analyst who has no idea really what's going on in a business. With all due respect to all those people at the analytical companies. We use our own software, and what we encourage our customers to do is when they encounter something that might be good to put in our software, they can go out to our idea space and they can submit that. Those ideas get looked at by our product team. Oftentimes there's duplication or there's overlap. I believe the latest number, don't hold me exactly to this, is we implement just north of 50% of the ideas that come in from customers, right, as part of our product and as part of our releases. Customers' voice is critical, and that's why and listening to that customer voice is why we get the high ratings on G2 Crowd.
That makes perfect sense, and we're a big fan of G2 Crowd as well, because we have and there's something common between our two companies. We're both rated very well there, respectively, and I think it's interesting. I feel like, particularly for mid-market companies and smaller, there's definitely more of a movement to go to look at a customer feedback driven rating like G2 Crowd versus an analyst driven one by Gartner. Do you think that trend will continue? Do you now
that I've sort of dissed the analysts, I'll actually give them a plug. I think there's room for both. I think the analysts are going to look at a space in a market through a different set of eyes, different lens than the customer will. The customer's going to look at it simply from the way they use the software, not how the software could be used and how it stacks up against competition. Right? Generally, if a customer's rating us on G2 Crowd, they're already using us. Right? That said, it's up to us as a company, both from a product perspective, from a services perspective, customer success perspective, to continue to work to earn that rating quarter over quarter, year over year.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that your comment about the analyst is interesting, because what I've seen is they can be it's very useful, the perspective, because they know all the players so well. They're able to formulate a vision of where an industry is going, whether for whatever slice of SaaS software you might be in. They can say, okay, this is where this segment's going, whether it's in iPaaS or whether it's an idea management. You can look at that and say, okay, well, they can say, hey, this is where it's headed, and these are the trends that we're seeing across industry. And what I see there, where that being useful, is it helps companies be more proactive. It lets them sort of skate to where the puck is going, so to speak. So they can say, like, okay, we're going to need this type of software. We're going to need these features based on our trajectory in a year or two, instead of being reactive. But it's just an interesting pairing of those two. And so many, I think so many smaller companies are very real. I mean, they end up being reliant on being more reactionary anyway in the lower half of the mid-market, that then they naturally gravitate towards some of those. Hey, I have a problem in X area. Then they would go and they would go to G2 Crowd to fix that. But I guess from what I see in industry, the analyst can provide a better perspective on where should they be looking for things that they aren't even aware of yet.
True. I do think there's an inherent risk in a software company of skating to where the analysts say the market is going. So when the analysts put together their assessment of a given market, they're doing so based upon feedback from organizations like yours and mine, where those organizations are stating what they're trying to do, and they tend to, let's just say, inflate, right, what they might be doing. And if it's inflated in the wrong direction, you just skate in that direction. It could be not so good for a company to go that direction. I think the analyst perspective should be considered, but there's lots of other analysis that should go on before you jump into a given market.
Totally fair. Totally fair. So we're getting towards the end of this pre-allotted time, and I have some end questions that I typically like to end with, and I always like to give Mark an opportunity to chat. But while we are talking about Brightidea, the idea management platform, I'm going to turn this podcast into an idea management platform, and I'm going to pitch you something that I've been thinking about, Michael, since you mentioned it a while ago, and I'm curious what you think. And this could be a great idea. If so, I'll take commission. It could be a terrible idea. If so, I'll cut it out of the podcast, and no one will ever hear. You mentioned that during these hackathons, someone might think about, how to integrate something, and that's what got this idea spinning. Or they could be thinking about a million different things. I'm wondering if Brightidea has ever thought about bringing in external companies to sponsor to sponsor a hackathon. And what I mean by that is, let's say Nike, one of your companies, or LinkedIn, one of the companies that uses Brightidea, has an internal hackathon going on. What if a company like Celigo or any other software company could sponsor this hackathon, meaning anyone within Nike who's participating in the hackathon, or LinkedIn who's participating in the hackathon, could essentially utilize a software like Celigo for free. Let's say they had an internal integration or automation goal. And rather than having to build everything themselves, we could sponsor them. They could utilize Celigo for free. And if this project had proven value, meaning let's say it could save $2 million a year, that would essentially set up companies like Celigo to get a foot in the door at Nike to become their iPass customer. Is that something like external hackathon sponsorship? Is that something that Brightidea has ever considered or would consider? And I don't necessarily mean this in terms of Celigo being a sponsor. Could other companies that offer really cool services sponsor hackathons through Brightidea? And if business value is proven, essentially lead to, maybe a cheaper contract, but also an opportunity for more software companies to get in the door of these enterprise businesses?
It's an interesting concept, because as you started with that train of thought, Jordan, and okay, so we do have customers that, software companies that run hackathons, and they run them to internal and external organizations, and typically they will come in and either subscribe to our software or just subscribe to it for a limited period of time for a single hackathon. But what you're saying is, can they, sponsor it potentially on behalf of another organization, right? Use LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a customer of ours. They run hackathons on our product. I don't know. I'll take that into our strategic planning. I'll share that with our CEO and our head of product. And, at the very least, I'll buy you a beer.
I'll take it. I'll take it. It's just an idea that popped up, and I thought it could be a cool way to get to speed up the hackathon and allow momentum to build, but also for businesses like Celigo and others to get a foot in the door and spread their evangelize their software and help these hackathons grow rather quickly, rather than, like in our example, having them build their own internal iPass via API. They could just use like a free trial or whatever this sponsorship entails of Celigo. But anyways, enough talking about Celigo. Before we wrap up with
let me just push that. I'm going to push this back to you, because another area that I think would be very open to sponsorship is a higher education space. So the big universities run hackathons, right? And they do this all the time. But like the smaller community colleges, right? I think organizations like Celigo, LinkedIn, Adobe, just companies like that could sponsor hackathons at those universities. Say, in essence, saying use our product to solve a market problem, right? And how does it benefit? It may benefit customers. It may benefit you, right, from a sales perspective. I do think there are definite opportunities for that. And I'll just get one last comment in here. Matt and Vin founded the company 23 years ago on the premise that there are problems in the world that need to be solved, and there are people out there with ideas looking for a problem to solve. Okay. And the company's gone through many iterations. Obviously, right now we're in the enterprise space. But I think that Matt and Vin still believe, I don't want to put thoughts into their head, but I think that they still believe, and I certainly believe, that there is an opportunity out there for people to get their idea out in a way that many different companies can look at it. And I think that the concept of ideas coming in from anywhere is gaining more and more traction at these large organizations, and is trickling down to smaller organizations. I think that could be the future of this space.
That's fantastic. I think that's a great way to end. I know we're coming up on time, and I don't want to take up too much of everyone's day. Mark, any last words or thoughts before we end this wonderful podcast with Michael O'Toole?
No, just thank you to Michael for your great thoughts and discussion today.
You're welcome. Thank you. I'm going to leave with one last comment. I actually am wearing a company T-shirt, and our goal is to create an idea where the best idea, create a world where the best idea wins, where ideas are selected in a meritocracy. So just a little plug. Thank you for the discussion, the opportunity.
Absolutely. Pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much, Michael O'Toole. For those of you listening and still here with us, thanks for joining us on the Celigo Technology Leaders Podcast. We'll see you all in about a week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.